Luke chapter 10. So we'll start out with question number 1. Think about a question. And that question is, how do you feel whenever you are able to complete a difficult task? And let's just say it's something that maybe somebody said you couldn't do or thought you couldn't do.
Accomplished.
I think that's kind of the nature of being a human being, isn't it? When somebody thinks you can't do something, or when somebody tells you you can't do something and then you're able to accomplish that, then there's a sense of pride that goes along with that. We might even, I don't know if we can say this about ourselves, but maybe even a little bit arrogant whenever we're able to accomplish that, or conceited, accomplished, I think. Is that the word that you use, Cindy? Yeah, that one sounds a lot better, accomplished. But generally speaking, the human race is all about measuring success, aren't they? And generally speaking, how do we measure success as human beings? Okay, that's one way. Steve says this: money, right? Dollars and cents. You make dollars and cents, or you have lots of dollars and cents, then you've been successful in this life by many standards. What else do we use, or what else do human beings use to measure success?
Unfortunately, each other.
Yeah, sometimes it's how much better you are than somebody else, right? And so if you're better than somebody else, you're successful in life. Anything else come to mind?
Popularity, power.
Yeah, I think all those things are measures that the world uses today to achieve this idea of success. But success is really, as human beings, success is the essential element of human life. Would you agree with that? I mean, does anybody here tonight want to be unsuccessful? Is that your goal in the human life? I think all of our goals, everybody's goal is to be successful. But the question is, how do you measure success? And of course, the way that man often measures success, I mean, even we look at numbers on our board and we think, well, we're doing good, right? That's successful. Well, there is a sense of pride and accomplishment that goes along with that. We might look at the dollars and cents and say, well, we're successful here, right? I think as kids and even as adults, part of it has to do with awards. If you get an award, you were successful. You get a promotion, you've been successful. And I bring this up because the story we're reading about tonight is these people that Jesus sent out on a limited commission. They come back, and in their eyes, they had been successful. But Jesus' measure of success is a little bit different than their measure. And so think about this tonight as we're beginning. Maybe we want to just kick it around a little bit. How do you think God measures whether our life is successful or not?
Whether we do it in His will.
Ultimately, it's whether we go to heaven or not, isn't it? And if we go to heaven or not, we've been successful. Or if we go, we've been successful in the eyes of God. But that's going to be the measure of success. It's not going to be about, well, how many dollars and cents did he make? How many awards did he win here on this life? How many promotions did he get in his job? How many numbers are in his salary? Things like that. Or what kind of car or brand of car did he drive? Or how big of a house did he build? Those are things that we use to view success in living here upon this earth. That's a human view of success. God's view is much, much different. So we'll talk about that a little bit here in Luke chapter 10. The first part of Luke chapter 10, the first 24 verses. Again, we don't have time to read all these. Hopefully you can, hopefully you've read them beforehand. If you haven't, you can kind of skim through them as we go through. Try to put the verses right by the questions so it makes it a little easier to find them and to answer them. But Jesus sends out 70 of his disciples on what we often refer to as the limited commission, because it wasn't given in the same sense as the Great Commission was given after the resurrection of Jesus. But question number 2 is this: in what manner were the 70 followers of Jesus sent out? 2 by 2, or we might say in pairs. And why do you think that's the case? I know the Bible doesn't just come out and say this is why Jesus did it, but why do you think it's the case that Jesus sent these guys out in pairs or 2 by 2? Why didn't you just send them out individually?
Support.
Okay, support. Any other reasons?
We need witnesses to the things that happen, so that people can confirm it.
Okay, you got more than one person confirming what's being said. I didn't even think about that, but that's a good point. Anything else?
Maybe protection.
Protection? You know, there's a lot of things that come to mind as to why Jesus chose to do this in the manner that he did. I was thinking about the words of Solomon in Ecclesiastes chapter 4, and he talks about the idea of 2 being better than 1. And I'll just read you some of the verses there. This is starting in verse 9. If you want to turn over there and read along, or you can write it down, look at it later. Or maybe you just want to forget about it. But anyway, we're going to look at it. Ecclesiastes chapter 4, verse 9. He says, 2 are better than 1 because they have a good reward for their labor. If they fall, one will lift up his companion. But woe to him who is alone when he falls, for he has no one to help him up. Again, if 2 lie down together, they will keep warm. But how can one be warm alone? Though one may be overpowered by another, 2 can withstand him, and a threefold cord is not quickly broken. You know, there's several great concepts that Solomon brings out about doing things with somebody else. You know, having somebody in your side. One of the things is you share the workload. You know, have you ever had to try to do a job alone, and then somebody comes along and helps you out? And you look at that and you say, man, if he'd been helping me or she'd been helping me the whole time, I've been done 10 times faster than what it took. If you're looking to make money, 2 incomes better than 1 income? Generally speaking, yeah, it is, right? The other example that he points out, well, what happens if you're out here, you know, by yourself and you're walking up the side of the mountain, you trip and you fall and you break your leg, and you're all alone. Well, you're in a tight spot, aren't you? Now, you're still hurting if you got somebody by your side, but at least you got somebody who can help you. It's better to have 2 than to be alone. He talks about the idea, of course, in that day and age, many people slept outside. Wasn't uncommon. What do you do if you get cold in the night? Well, you huddle together and share body heat. Well, what are you going to do if you're by yourself? There's nothing you can do. 2 are better than 1. He also talks about the idea of attack. You know, one person might be able to overcome you, but if you have a friend by your side, that same person might not be able to prevail against both of you. And so there's a host of reasons, I think, that probably deserve to be gone over tonight. We don't have the time to do it, but really emphasizing the idea of how much better it is to do something with somebody by your side to help you, to not go at something alone. Think about the Christian life today. Is it better with more people by your side? Could you imagine having to live the Christian life alone? I mean, that'd be hard. I was thinking about Noah, and I know he wasn't all alone in the sense that most of his family came along with him, but that was one family in the entire world who was doing what was right. I mean, how hard do you think that had to be? You go at something alone, it's much harder. It's a lot easier when you've got people around you to help you out, to lift you up, and to encourage you. And so I think, again, there's a reason why Jesus did what he did. There's a reason why he sent them out 2 by 2 or in pairs. So question number 3 is this: what instructions did Jesus give? Now notice this, I wrote down here, I didn't do that by accident, the 72 concerning their departure. Yeah, he said travel light, didn't he? When we say travel light, what do we mean? Yeah, he said, well, he told them what not to take, didn't he? What did he tell them not to take?
First.
He said, don't bring a money bag, right? Don't need to be hauling around a bunch of money here with you. What else?
Extra shoes.
Yeah, don't bring an extra pair of shoes. Usually when you go on vacation, you take more than one pair of shoes, don't you? Or if you travel, You say, well, what happens if these tear up? Well, I've got these, I've got a spare that I can turn to and rely upon. What else? One other important thing.
Script.
Yeah, script. That's kind of an interesting translation or interesting word. Do a little research on it, and well, basically you'll see it represents the idea of a food bag. So they weren't supposed to pack a bunch of food and take it along with them. So basically, Jesus is telling them here, don't bring all the money. Don't worry about money. Don't worry about bringing food. Don't worry about bringing extra shoes or anything like that. And the second part of that question, no, I didn't really put it on here, but why do you think that was the case? Why did Jesus tell them that? Okay, I think one of the reasons would be trust, right? Trusting God, trusting that when Jesus sends them out to do this and says you don't need these things, that they're really not going to need them. What else? Any other reason?
I think it's so that they can see that He provided.
Okay. Yeah, God was certainly going to provide for them. He also tells them something else not to do, though. What else did He tell them not to do? Yeah, He said, don't be stopping along the roadside talking to everybody, right? So why would He say that? What would be the reason behind that? There was an urgency in this work that Jesus gave them to do, right? I think what He's telling them is don't be wasting time here. This isn't just go about it whenever you feel like it. You're on a mission. You got a goal. Here's what you're supposed to do. Put your nose to the grindstone, get out there and start doing it. And maybe that's part of the reason why He tells them about the other things too. If you're hauling around a bunch of money, do you have any worries? You got some concerns and some thoughts? Is your attention a little divided? If you're carrying around a bunch of food, you say, oh, I got to go get my food bag. Can't leave that behind, and can't forget my extra pair of shoes in case I need them, I think really all of it was designed around this idea that there was urgency, that they were to be focused. Their attention was to be undivided. And so they were to take away anything that was going to distract from this work and this goal that Jesus had given them to do. The time to act was right now, and the hour was then. It was time to go to work. So I mentioned in question number 3 here to 72. Some versions say 72, some say 70. I'll just bring that up to your attention. I'm not going to go into a discourse about it tonight, but it's one of those manuscript discrepancies, depending on which manuscript you use to translate it. But it is a difference in some manuscripts. I think it's about 50-50 in the majority, or in the number of manuscripts that we have. So what were Jesus' followers, question number 4 here, what were they supposed to do about accommodations?
Whatever house you went into, you stayed there.
Yeah, they were to rely upon others to take care of it, weren't they? And Jesus basically told them, accept whatever anybody gives you. If somebody offers you a place to stay, go stay with it. They give you something to eat, take that food and eat it. And he makes a statement. It's a statement that's pretty common throughout the pages of the Bible. But the laborer is worthy of his hire. What does that mean?
If you're working for the Lord, they can provide for you.
Yeah. How many people in the world today work for free? Anybody here work for free? You might think you work for free. I guarantee you get something out of it. Why do we not work for free?
Gotta eat.
Because if you work, you're worthy to be paid, aren't you? You're worthy to be rewarded. And so the laborer is worthy of his hire. I often mention that when we come across it. I don't preach that because I'm a preacher. I don't dwell upon it because I'm dissatisfied with my pay. I don't want anybody to get that impression. I always tell the elders they pay me more than I'm worth. They should take some back. But the Bible does lay down the idea, should a laborer be taken advantage of, even if they're laboring for the Lord? No. Should they be self-conscious that they're taking something from somebody else? Should they be embarrassed because of it? No. If they're out here doing the work, the laborer is worthy of his reward or his hire, isn't he? And I think there's there's kind of a flip side of that coin, though, too, that is worth mentioning. And I think there's some people who view the idea of getting rewarded for working in the kingdom as, I'll go to the highest bidder. You think that's a good attitude? It's not about getting rich, is it? Jesus didn't tell them, you go to that house, and then you go to that house, and then you go to that house, and then you go to another house. He said, you go to the house that invites you, and you stay there. Be content. Don't say, well, this guy's got a better house over here. He's got better food and a bigger room that I can stay in. I'll go over there and sit. But there's two sides of that idea. So the laborer is worthy of his wages. But again, they weren't to be greedy in that. They weren't to want more and more and more because of that. So the disciples go out. They do what Jesus told them to do. They preach the gospel. They heal the sick. They cast out demons. And question number 5 here, what do they report whenever they come back to Christ? What's their attitude?
They're very happy.
Yeah, they're filled with joy, aren't they? They're rejoicing. They're happy. And why are they happy? Because they were successful, right? Jesus said, you go out here, you preach the gospel, you prepare the people for me, prepare the way for me, you heal the sick, you cast out demons, and it went great, didn't it? They went to these places, they met with success, they come back, and they're telling Jesus about all these things that have happened. They probably can't believe half of them that they did, but one of the things that they're experiencing joy about, they said, listen, even the demons were listening to us. That's how good it was. Not just the people, but the demons did whatever we told them to do too. And so in their mind, had they been successful? Yeah. But what does Jesus, question number 6 here, why does Jesus say they should rejoice? Yeah. He said, don't rejoice over this, measure of success that you've experienced out here. That's not what should be your joy. That's not what should be driving you. That's not what should make you the happiest. What should make you the happiest is the fact that your name's written in heaven. Your name's written in the book of life. And that's really the real basis for joy even in Christianity. It's not numbers. Now again, did numbers make us feel good? Yes, because we're human, right? But the real basis for rejoicing in Christianity is what? Our name is written in heaven. Isn't that what makes life worth living? Isn't that what makes doing what God told us to do worth doing here upon this earth? So Jesus kind of gives them a different perspective. And basically what he tells them is the real joy is the fact that you're saved, you're going to make it to heaven, and you're serving the Lord. You're out here doing what God asked you to do. And it's a good lesson because, again, is it easy to be happy when you experience success? How should we measure success in Christianity?
Are we right with God?
Even if these guys went out here and did everything Jesus told them to do, and nobody listened to them, would they have been successful in the eyes of God? Yeah. The way that God views success and the way that we view success is not really the same. And it's easy to rejoice when you see those victories. It's easy to rejoice when you experience that success. But understand, you're just as successful even if nobody listens to you, as if 10,000 people listen to you. I know it doesn't feel like it as a human being, but in God's eyes, we're just as successful. And the joy comes from our name being written in heaven because we're doing what the Lord told us to do. I thought about a passage about Jesus over in Hebrews chapter 12 and verse 2, where the Hebrew writer tells us to look unto Jesus, the author and the finisher of our faith. And then it makes this statement. It's always been kind of a difficult statement for me to comprehend. But talking about Christ, it says, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross. Think about the cross. Would you look at the cross and the pain and the suffering and everything that Jesus went through and say, well, that was a success? Would you look at it as a physical victory? It was tragedy, wasn't it, physically speaking? But Jesus saw the joy in the cross because it was what God told him to do and what God wanted him to do. And that's where joy comes from. It comes from not our outward circumstances, but from our inward peace and knowing that we're doing what God asked us to do. We're fulfilling his plan, and our names are written in heaven because of that. Jesus talked about a group of people, question 7 here, who were envious of the disciples. Who were that? Or who was that?
Prophets and kings.
Yeah, he said there were many prophets and kings who wanted to be where they were. You know, can you imagine? Just think about the position they were in. You know, to actually see God in the flesh here upon this earth. I mean, it's almost beyond fathom, isn't it? Think about the position they were in. They literally heard Jesus preach and teach. And, you know, that in and of itself, I just can't imagine what it'd be like to hear God, you know, expound upon his word that he's revealed to us. You ever sat through a lesson, or maybe you preached it yourself, maybe you're that good, or maybe you went through a Bible class and you get done and you say, man, that was amazing. You know, just the way the Word of God was expounded and divided and laid out really simply. I mean, they got to hear that every single day, multiple times a day. The Lord himself, you know, laying these things out in a very plain and simple, very easy to understand fashion. And so he's telling them, you guys are blessed here. You know, there are many prophets who would gladly take your place. There are many kings who want to be where you are today. And so it kind of got me to think about question number 8 here. What can we see today and hear today about God that the disciples and the prophets and the kings could not? Are we blessed? Yeah, the Bible tells us time and time again we are, right? What'd you say, Adam?
Well, no, which is perfect is come. That's the complete word of God. We have that.
Yeah, I don't think we often appreciate where we are today as Christians. You know, we have this benefit of looking back on the plan of God and seeing it preached to mankind, seeing it revealed, seeing it carried out, and then it's expounded to us so that we understand everything that was involved in that. I think about all the types and the antitypes of the Bible. I know I mentioned those things from time to time. But you know, all those things we read about in the Old Testament, they're a picture of something greater that was coming. And did those people understand all that? We don't even understand all of them today. But we can see bits and pieces and glimpses of the great wisdom of God in foreshadowing something greater that was coming in these people and in these events, and just all the wealth of information in the Old Testament. So, you know, we're blessed to be able to see all those things, to see the prophecies, to read about the predictions, and to see their fulfillment. And do you think there's anybody today who lived in the past who would desire to be where we are? Would trade lives with us, places with us in history? I'd say about all of them would, wouldn't you? To be able to be where we are today. So we're blessed just like these people were too. All right, so that's the 7th here in a nutshell. Let's talk a little bit about the parable of the Good Samaritan in the latter part of this chapter. There's a man that comes to Jesus, not just any man, but a scribe. And what question does he ask Jesus? Question number 9 here on your handout.
Who's my neighbor?
Okay, that's ultimately where the question ended up. He started with what question first?
What shall I do to inherit life?
What do I need to do to live forever? Right? That's basically the questions that he's asking him. And why is he asking him this question?
Because he was tempting him.
Yeah, remember this kind of underlying story that we have going throughout this narrative? What are the chief Jews out to do? What's their goal? They're trying to kill Jesus, aren't they? Yeah, and the way they're going to do it is they're going to catch him in his words. You know, they're going to get him to say something that violates Roman law, or they're going to get him to say something that's going to stir up the people or the rest of the Jews and get them mad at him, and maybe they'll attack him themselves. And so he comes to Jesus with this question, and again, it's not sincere, but he's trying to trip him up. He's trying to discredit him, and he's trying to get him to say something that's going to stir some of these people up and get them away from following him. So Jesus basically turns the question on him. He says, "You're the expert of the law. You tell me. What does the law say?" And of course, the young man said, "Well, you got to love God first and foremost, all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and your neighbor as yourself." And Jesus said, "You do that, and you'll live forever." But there was a little bit more behind his questioning too and reasoning, right? It wasn't just the things that he wanted to do to inherit eternal life. He wanted Jesus to really bear down on the word neighbor. Okay, let's talk about our neighbor here, right? Who is our neighbor? Because if you're saying Gentiles are our neighbors, what do you think? How do you think the Jews would feel about that? Think they'd all be on board? No, I doubt it. Right? You're going to cause some problems here, right? You're going to stir up some controversy. And so, what does he ask about loving one's neighbor? Question 10. Who is that? Yeah, define neighbor for me, right? And why does he ask that question? Or why does he bear down on that particular word?
Well, he's trying to justify himself because he's an eternal.
Yeah, he wants to feel good about himself, right? And so he says, how do I justify my words and my actions in defining the word neighbor? You ever meet somebody like that who wants to define every word? Well, I should say this. There's nothing wrong with defining words. The problem is redefining words, and that was really where this guy was coming from. He wanted to redefine the word neighbor, didn't he? He wanted to assign his own definition to this word. And so if he could assign his own definition to this word, then that would justify his words and his actions that the way he'd been conducting himself here upon this earth. Same trick that a lot of people use today. So how does Jesus reply to that question, who is my neighbor? Yeah, so he tells a story, right? A parable. And a parable is what? Yeah, basically it's an illustration, isn't it? It's an earthly illustration it's an earthly story to illustrate spiritual truth to us. Let me ask you a question here. Why Jesus, this was one of the famous ways that he taught, right? He used a lot of illustrations. He used a lot of physical illustrations to teach spiritual lessons. What is the advantage and purpose of an illustration?
Keep it simple, stupid.
It helps you see the point, doesn't it? It helps illustrate in a picture, what you're trying to convey to the audience. Listen, illustrations in sermons and in preaching are scriptural. Now, you don't just want to do illustrations for your entire sermon or lesson. I've run into some people who that was their expertise. No scripture, all illustrations. Well, Jesus had a scripture, didn't he? But he also had an illustration to go along with it. It helped to drive the point home. It helped people to see more clearly the scriptural point of what he was teaching to this man. And so we have the story of the Good Samaritan. We all know that story. I assume we all know that story. A man is beaten and robbed and left by the wayside. Of course, you have the priest. He passes by, sees him, passes by on the other side. You have a Levite, sees him, passes by. And then you have a Samaritan who comes to his aid and helps him and takes care of him and sees that he's nursed back to health. So question number 13 here, we're going to skip over 12. Why did the Samaritan help this man? Yeah, I've been bringing that word up about every week, I feel like, in our studies. But take a little time when you go through these and read them and see how often this word pops up. compassion. And it was because compassion came before everything else in this man's life. Came before his prejudices. Was he a Samaritan? This guy was a Jew. Were there reasons, racially speaking, why he shouldn't help him? Yeah. Did it take any of his time? Did it take his energy? Did it take his money? None of those things were in the forefront of why this guy helped somebody. The whole thing had to do with the idea of compassion. Okay, he saw somebody who was in need. He didn't see somebody of the opposite race. He didn't see somebody who was going to suck away his time and his energy and his money. He saw somebody who needed help, genuinely needed help. And because of that, he helped this man. Jesus uses that, question 14, that relationship. He calls it being a neighbor. And so the big question is not who is my neighbor, but to whom can I be a neighbor? Being a neighbor to somebody has nothing to do with race. It has nothing to do with geography. Does it have anything to do with your religious beliefs? These were Samaritans and Jews. Were they different in religious beliefs? You better believe it. None of those things have anything to do with being a neighbor to somebody. It's seeing somebody who needs help. And because they need help, you help that person, regardless of their race, their geography, their religion. So, how does the legal expert end up defining neighbor in this parable? Question 15. Who was the neighbor? What did he say? The guy who helped. The guy who showed kindness. It's interesting he didn't say the Samaritan, right? He said the guy who showed kindness. The guy who helped out. And what does Jesus, question 16 here, what does he command this expert of the law to do in response to this parable? Yeah. Think about, as Christians, sometimes when we want to try to wiggle out of our responsibilities, we try to make it technical, don't we? We look at what God tells us to do, and we try to make it more complex than it needs to be. We try to make it more philosophical than it needs to be. We overanalyze things. And Jesus made it plain and practical. He said, you go do what he did. You go imitate him. You go put the law into practice. And generally speaking, it's really that easy, isn't it? It's easy, but it's not. Go do what Jesus told us to do. Don't worry about the technicality. Quit trying to define and redefine words. Just go do what Jesus told us to do. And so that was a lesson for this young lawyer. All right, we're out of time. Anybody got any thoughts, comments?